Kia ora, hello, and welcome to a new episode of Play Notes, the podcast where we give you the lowdown on the plays and playwrights you think you should know. I'm your host, Emily Duncan.
And I'm your other host, Allison Horsley. We are both dramaturgs, aka script advisors, story consultants, drama demons, narrative nerds, all the wonderful things.
That we are.
Yay! Now, in the second episode...
This is the third episode, Allison.
It's the third
episode, yeah.
Oh my god.
Yes, it's trifecta.
It is. It's the 8th episode where we're talking to playwrights. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, don't do that to me. 3 episodes. This is the 6th episode of season 2.
But the
Let's
third
not
episode...
argue about this now. Yeah. Can we not?
Who's on first?
Okay.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about who our amazing third playwright is that we're interviewing?
Jo Randerson is a writer, multimedia artist and theatre maker based in Pōneke, Wellington. Her writing has twice been shortlisted for the International Institute of Modern Letters Prize and has earned her multiple writing fellowships, including the Robert Burns here in Ōtepoti Dunedin, the Winston Churchill, where she was based in Russia, and the Creative New Zealand Department of Conservation Wild Creations Residency at Cape Kidnappers. Now, Jo has been involved in numerous theatre collaborations, including with playwright and screenwriter Briar Grace Smith and dancer and choreographer Douglas Wright. Her published work includes The Knot and Through the Door, published by Wedge Press, and The Spit Children and The Keys to Hell, published by Victoria University Press, and the short story collection Tales from the Netherworld, published by Steele Roberts. Jo has been nominated for a Billy T Award, as well as receiving the aforementioned Robert Burns Fellowship, the Bruce Mason Award for Playwriting, an Arts Foundation New Generation Award, and in 2021 received the Order of New Zealand Merit for services to the performing arts. Jo is the co-founder and artistic director of Barbarian Productions, whose award-winning shows have been played in Melbourne, Prague, Edinburgh, Adelaide, Norway, and Brisbane, as well as around Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now, Barbarian is based in an old bowling club that has been repurposed for multiple uses by the local community, and Barbarian was the first performing arts community to go living wage. Jo is motivated by social justice and equity, and is especially passionate about arts and the economy, which is particularly relevant to the work we're going to be talking to Jo about today.
Without further ado, let's get into it.
Kia ora, Jo. Great to see you. Welcome home. I gather you've just come back from overseas.
Yep, I have. I'm about 2 days back from a trip to Marseille, working on a project over there at the National Ballet, which is not I've never worked in a ballet school before, actually. So it's really fun and interesting, and Marseille was a beautiful city, and I feel very lucky to have had, some time in the sea. We swam every day. Sorry to be saying that too.
It's freezing here.
It is so cold today.
8 degrees.
Yeah. It's not much more than that here in Pōneke now, but I was soaking up every second of that amazing sun, knowing I was coming back too. But I was also really happy to come back. It's Matariki. I'm like, bring me home too. I miss this country.
How long were you there?
I was away for 1 month and I had 3 weeks in Marseille. So because I got this job working over there, I thought that's so silly to go that far and not do some catch-ups with my other buddies. So did a little whirlwind, went to like Berlin and saw my friend Kate McIntosh there, and then went through Brussels where I lived for a year and saw some mates and saw my Circus Ronaldo friends. So I feel, really it was an amazing kind of wintertime, summer holiday kind of gift. And also, it was kind of hard to go away from my kids for that long, but also it was a good circuit breaker. Everyone's been through lockdown and all of that. We've had a lot of time at home and with our families, and I felt very, very lucky to be able to have a little breather on my own time. Do you think that's gonna feed into the work that you're gonna develop next? I was working on my book. Speed is Emotional is a new text that I'm working on. It's not a book, it's a theatre show, but I also viewed it as a residency time, to work on that. So I did kind of cram in the work over there. But it's good to be busy and working. And yeah, I think it did. Actually, the show I was working on was a show with a family, and this show will feature my family in it as well. So that was quite nice watching them work. Theirs was a dance piece. It's with Amit Noy, who's a really beautiful dancer, and his parents and younger sister. So it was quite beautiful watching them work, but it's quite hard to work with your family, I think, right?
I haven't tried it and I'm not planning to. I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, no, I haven't tried it either.
Yeah.
Oh.
So today we're going to talk about a script of yours from, was it like 22 years ago when it was first performed? And first performed here in Ōtepoti Dunedin, if I'm correct. Banging Cymbal, Clanging Gong. I'm always anxious I'm going to get the name wrong. My head goes crashing drum. Yeah.
And even then you've said dong. So
did I? Oh, gong.
Gong.
Done it.
We were joking because I kept wanting to say, danging gongle. Yeah.
It's actually one of my favorite things though, is people say like, I saw your like crashing, banging gong. I do. I love it. Yeah. So I'm glad for that.
Okay. So for the record, banging cymbal, clanging gong. And I wouldn't have known this unless revisiting the script a couple of weeks ago, I put the title into Google and it's from Corinthians in the New Testament, which is not in my wheelhouse.
No. Well, I did grow up in that wheelhouse, and I think that much as my father is a priest in the Anglican Church. He's a very liberal social justice warrior kind of priest. He was a bit far out on the left wing in the church here in Aotearoa. So that was kind of what I grew up with, and we grew up at St. Peter's with, a lot of anti-racism campaigns, anti-nuclear campaigns, very much kind of like protest and community, like amazing feminist services where giant swaths of red fabric would be unleashed through the church, and it would be like, this represents menstrual blood, and people sort of up in arms. Lots of arguments, I remember, but good healthy arguments. And I think that's kind of where I came from, and where I definitely find a link with my theatre. And I guess that there are some of those deep philosophies that I feel still really connected to. I don't feel very connected to the patriarchal church. I don't feel connected to a lot of, definitely of the right-wing church tradition, but I do think that there are some faith practices that I haven't personally, I've found connections to in lots of other disciplines. Like I love a lot of other religions, but I do feel, particularly within the Pākehā world, like sometimes I'm like, where's our sustenance for building pacifist ideologies? Because it's more than just a theory. I think like non-violence is not just an intellectual theory. You need practice for it, and the practice for it comes in living with communities and people who think differently, and So that's sort of my, not that this was like a pro-religious play. I'm not trying to justify or defend the church, but definitely there were some deep groundings in that spiritual way of thinking that have really hung with me. And I guess that's why that quote was in there. It's because it's also like, if I don't have love in my heart, I've got nothing. Like I'm just a furious, angry noise. And that's what there's a lot of anger around and argument about things. And again, I'm like, well, how do we practice healing and reconciling difference and acknowledging difference, but also going, some behavior can't, that's not okay.
There's a quote, I'm paraphrasing here, I picked up in a Pantograph Punch, Loose Cannons piece you did. Actually, I've got the quote in front of me. You wrote, listen to your enemies, listen hard. This eliminates the need for spying. And I wondered, in a way, is this script a way of putting into practice that listening? It moves it out of the theoretical space.
Yeah, that's a cool point. I mean, I think that's what theatre can do and art can do is as you say, move it out of a theoretical space. Like in the climate change conversations, lots of people have been saying for a while, we know the statistics. We just need things that can shift people's hearts and minds and make action change, and that's stories, really. I think that's what art can do, is kind of get in at the spirit or at the heart and make that shift in its clever, complex myriad of ways that it can do. And I think that enemies thing, that's interesting. I used to be really into friends and enemies, I think, and I guess that has diffused a lot more for me. I definitely, there'll always be people who think quite differently to you, to any of us, but thinking about people as enemies is not really helpful, but nor can you gloss over, those really big rifts that sit between people. But how do you enter into that space of listening and shifting, and I guess the faith, to me, is to go like, look, there can be an outcome that can work for everyone, and sometimes that just takes a lot more time than others to really listen. And like a lot of people, well, some people say like you can't make consensus decisions, but I think you can. It just sometimes takes a lot of time. But I think from my mum, have inherited, or just whatever in our genetic whakapapa, a really war and conflict. I'm just like, it's such a childish way to respond to differences of opinion. It's such a baby response.
It seems I'm jumping off on a tangent here, but it made me think of how we currently, I'm generalising here, like to put time limits or units of time onto things. And I think it was the leader of the opposition saying sometime in the past year he's going to put like a deadline on treaty negotiations. It'll all be done with by then. And I thought, well, how convenient for you. But like ultimately, what is it going to achieve? And why this brings me back to your script, something I really appreciate about it is that theatrically you create space at the start of it. Even though there's tension there and aggression, it's still creating space, as I read it before, just rolling into a diatribe.
Yeah, because it kind of, it's a moment of almost it's like you front foot it with opposition, like in terms of confronting the audience in a way and confronting like the theatrical space. So it's funny that then by the end you bridge that. So with everything you've just said, I just keep thinking about this play and the fact that so much of it is about finding your people and friendship. And I wonder, is your view, I mean, so you wrote this 22 years ago, like, how do you feel like your views have evolved since you wrote it, or have they? Like, is this just as current for you now as it was for you then?
Yeah, cool question. I haven't read this for a good few years, and sometimes I feel nervous too, because I think, will I be embarrassed about some parts of it? But also, like, it is what it is, like plays are like shedding your cicada skin or something. They're an imprint of where you were at that time, and I don't feel embarrassed about that. But I do sometimes, because I made it in that first flurry and toured it around a bit and had that amazing performance at Ellen Hall. That was really a real landmark moment for me as well, and I was very nervous about performing it there at the legendary Ellen Hall as well. And then with my son Geronimo, when he was 8, we took it to Perth, and I did a season with him, I think in Tamaki and over there and maybe down here as well. So I kind of revisited it like, I don't know, what's that, 15, 20 years later or something.
I think there's a date on here. I found a Metro piece, was it 2016?
Okay, 2016, and was it first in 2001 or something?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so there was a 15-year interval. I guess in that interval, I felt, it was really, some people at Vic University did like a 3-woman version of it, which was amazing to see. And I think I had little kids at the time then, and I was like, what? Like, why do you like this? Or what are you going to do with it? And that was like I felt like I'd sent a message in a bottle that had then come back to myself or something. I was like, oh, this, still does have some currency, or it's nice. I've always felt that particularly women would say to me, this is the only monologue piece that I can find where there's actually like a part where a woman is like not just crying that her husband left, or or worried for her child. So that I got some nice feedback from people and resonances that this was important, especially to hear from a female voice. And then I sometimes am like, am I going to do it again when I'm 60? And I don't know. So coming back to your question, I guess it's still, maybe it's like a manifesto. I don't really like that word, but it was something that I think I still hold to really hard, which is probably that that I feel that kind of like love and connection and care for people is stronger than any kind of sophistication or high-end culture. Like, I'm not a high art person. I absolutely, that's not a world I feel comfortable in. I find it elitist. I find it has really dodgy values sometimes, and I'm a person who likes to be able to exist in and out of a lot of different realities. And if I'm excluded, like I'm a marriage celebrant as well, and sometimes people would get a shock when they saw my like green mohawk and things, and that would make me so angry that I was so judged. I know that's quite a naive response, but I really do feel that people, I get really angry when people aren't allowed in places for whatever reasons, their clothes, their hair, the way they talk, the way they look, whatever. I guess that kind of like angry or defense of kind of equality or something is still a benchmark. So I think I still hold to it, but I'm nervous to, it has to be the right moment to open it again and see how I respond.
Do you remember a particular spark or inspiration for writing the piece? I'm wondering if there was one particular in to it, for example, an image or I definitely, we had gone overseas with a women's theatre group called Magdalena, and that was I think I was kind of here in Aotearoa being a bit like, can't find my people, don't know where I belong, like I'm sure many people do, and met Jill Greenhalgh from Wales, who said come on over. I think she was surprised that I actually did. I just sort of showed up on her doorstep and babysat her children in the morning, and then she'd work with me in the afternoon, and it was all a really nice fit. But we were at a festival over there in Denmark at the Ōtepoti, which is Eugenio Barber and Julia Varley and all of that crew, and they have a beautiful story too of kind of starting up, like all not getting into the main drama school and then forming their own group. So they had a nice beginning too, but they're also very sophisticated and very intellectual and I admire them a lot, but also I felt like an angry bastard next to them. And definitely the spark for this show I could feel in there when we'd be doing workshops with all these European practitioners. And I remember me and Stasa from the clinic and a few other New Zealanders who were over there, we felt we were so big and we were so loud, and we were kind of giggled at a bit because when we did exercises we were never very good at it, and the Spanish and Italian petite women were so, they were so good, and we just felt like, well, I definitely felt loud and ugly and uncivilized and all of those sort of things. So I think that is definitely where
a genesis came from. And also there's probably a Danish connection because our name Randerson there's a town called Randers in Denmark, and so we have some of this kind of Viking heritage. So I think I was kind of going like, okay, what is the value? Like, I'm like, I know that we have value from down south. We're not just, I feel I inherited these ideas that we're like the bottom of the world and unsophisticated, don't know how to do work like the Europeans do, but also knew that we're freaking awesome and have our own note that we play on the scale, but trying to figure out how to feel good about that. So I think it was definitely out of that whole scenario that this play was forming, like a kind of a defense for uncivilized behavior. So our company is called Barbarian Productions because I still feel like, hey guys, this got value, and that's what it rose out of. But I did a showing of it over there and it was very bad, and it was, so when I got to do it at Allen Hall in the proper, it was really like, that was the triumph moment.
So the character, to say, for people who want to read the play, contact Play Market, so the character is a barbarian, and I'll let you describe more of the character, Jo, but I was just thinking of the story world. Another thing I really like about the script is you can't necessarily anchor it in a specific place and time. There's a timelessness about it.
Mm-hmm. And a placelessness too. It kind of transcends
and
place in a way, which is funny.
Against what we're often made to think, like as dramaturgs or playwrights, make it specific.
Right.
Nail it down.
Well, and it's funny too that you so closely identify with being a New Zealander too, that because your use of the language in the text, like it's different. You use different languages. There's the bastardos and stuff like that. Like, it kind of transcends all of it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe that is my specificness, is a feeling and an identification with that. I'm also now currently going through an experience of kind of learning more about ADHD and what that is, and a lot of the kind of earlier feelings of loneliness and things like that. I'm realizing that a lot of people on the Asperger's spectrum also felt, and am going through my own like diagnosis process with that. So there's kind of other lenses that are still revealing themselves to me as I age. But that kind of, I think it's quite human generally looking for your people, and obviously there are more specificnesses to that than others. Like if you are really physically removed from your genetic bloodline and things like that are way more challenging than the situation that I am in. But I think also connections are so precious in life, and sometimes finding artistic collaborations that work, I'm like, that's really hard. Like you have a lot of collaborations that don't work, and it's not normal to find people that you really like working with, or have close friendships with, or they're rare and precious, those connections, I think. That's all.
Yeah. That's beautifully said.
Yeah. Oh, when you're saying that, I was thinking we often, speak for myself really, remember those experiences working in this field that maybe bruised us more than lifted us up. And it's like anything, especially if you don't feel connected, it's really challenging to rebuild that trust.
Yeah, it is. And the arts industry, the performing arts industry is really hard. I think if we were better resourced as an industry, we would be more sympathetic and supportive to each other. So I think that we do pretty well for a very hard context to be in. And I really, I think that if we were not, it's just so much easier to be kind and supportive when you're getting all your needs met, right? And yeah, that's definitely an industry pressure that I wish we didn't have, because we can be hard on each other. Yeah, and as you say, then we remember those moments. But then also remember working in retail, and they'd say, like, this is normal. If someone has a bad experience, they'll tell 10 people. If they have a good experience, they'll tell between 1 and 3 people. So for whatever reason, like, maybe we expect everything to be good, so when it isn't, we're more shocked and we tell people. That's a kind of a kind explanation of it. But maybe also we can focus on the negative. And like, I love how Cornel West says, you know, he's like, we're blues people, we come from the chaos and we come from the nothing, like everything is a bonus. And I guess that's where that like spiritual practice or something comes in, to go, yes, our lives are hard, these things come on us and at us, and some people have way more of that than others, you know, so not to say it's an even playing field, but within that there are practices that we can use to help us. I'm not trying to Pollyanna it, like, I don't think everything's good, but I think we can practice finding and manifesting things a bit around us and looking for that. I definitely think there can be a cycle of getting stuck in the drama of what isn't going wrong, and I hate it when I feel it in myself, because it can be a bit addictive.
Yeah, it's very easy to get stuck in that rut.
Yeah, and it's got to be said as well, you know, like, that's the thing that I always find, it's like, you can't suppress that. It must be said and it must be heard. And then what is the next phase? And it shouldn't always be on the people who are having the hard experiences to be advocating for the change. Yeah.
This brings me back to what I think is one of the real strengths of the character, the barbarian, as I read it, is that it's showing us vulnerability as well within the piece. And not always, you know, if you said to someone, Hector, show me being vulnerable, it's not that vulnerable. You know, vulnerability can be in different modes. And we need to see that to know that it's possible.
Yeah, it was a sort of like aggressive vulnerability or something. Like, she's definitely angry, and that's a guard for some of the pain. Sometimes I think about Kim Hill, you know, like, I love Kim Hill. I love the vulnerability that sits there under this very tough surface, and that's quite a New Zealand thing, I think, as well, is to kind of not front with that vulnerability. But yeah, that's the point that we know from clown or performance, is when we really connect, or just human life. Like, when someone shares their vulnerability, we actually really love people for that. But yeah, we don't tend to lead with it, despite all of Brené Brown's talks. You know, like, I don't see a lot of corporate circles really practicing vulnerability.
Well, how often do we just take some space to sit down and play some Bach on the piano?
True. Yeah. Well, and that was always an interesting moment in the script where I felt people would be a bit like, oh, this just like angry ranting thing. And then I could feel a shift when I played that, and they were like, oh, she can play. And then they were a bit more like, okay. But it's like showing a little bit of that mastery, as I remember one person saying, like, really did make people listen more. And I thought that's quite a cool little hack to have up your sleeve.
And she apologises for her language. It's, you know, speaking in French. As, you know, she can speak in French. Okay.
Yeah. She's got to get around. She has to be in and out of a lot of spaces. Yeah.
So we're going to finish with 4 fast questions, if you're ready, Jo.
Right.
Okay.
I'm up.
All right. Number 1. What is one thing about playwriting that you could have only learned in practice?
I don't know how to say this very well, but like, listening to audiences and being in an audience when your play is being read out, it's all about the rhythm and the dynamism, and you feel that when it dies and drops, you feel the audience shift. So it's just that difference between what something looks like on the page and what you think is a cool or clever and crafted idea, and how that magical translation happens when it's in front of an audience. Like only by sitting in audiences over and over do you learn that, and I love that.
Great. Number 2, what is something you never want to see or hear on a stage again?
I never want to see on a stage again women being injured and hurt or raped. I just went to a show in Marseille where a woman was raped on stage, and me and Amit were just like, why is this here? I can't believe this. I don't think that would happen in Aotearoa. And I am just over those images. They are so, I don't want to see them ever again unless a woman is in control of it, and thinking really carefully why they are putting that there.
Thank you. Number 3, do you see your connection with Dunedin reflected in your writing? If so, how?
I think what I was saying before about New Zealand feeling like you're at the bottom of the world, I feel like Dunedin is like that in New Zealand, and it has this sort of like staunchness and like sometimes islands, like when we've taken our comedy to Australia, they say you're like the Tasmanians, you have a weirdness to you that you don't get if you're on mainland, if you're on a big continent, and it's true. And I think Ōtepoti has also that kind of island kind of culture to it in a way. What?
Weirdness.
Weirdness and clearness in what it is, and kind of like, I don't care what you think of us, this is our vibe and this is our note. And so I really connect with that, and I felt, I just think that's I guess also doing the residency down there and feeling like when you talk to other writers who've been down there, there's that feeling of you're all away from home usually, and then something can sort of bubble up that is a bit more free, and and that's in the same way that students sometimes are like away from home, and so there's this kind of freedom and staunchness. That's what I feel.
Nice.
No one has ever, I always have tried to describe why I've chosen to live in Dunedin, and I always say I love the weirdness. I love that it's weird, and that's the best description that I've heard so far of why I live
here.
It
is weird, and it's great. It's great for that. The music, the fashion, the theatre, it's it's great.
I also talk about the sort of clearness of removing yourself. That's how I see it. I think there is, even though it's 8 degrees, high of 8 degrees Celsius here today, there's something to be said for that cold, sharp air that gives you a reset. I remember a few years ago going to a conference in Auckland in the middle of winter and go, this is terrible. I want to come home to the dreck.
It's not hard enough here.
It's
stuffy.
Oh, it's so cold. I better pour all my energy into writing something rather than going to the beach. I hear you. I get that. It's focusing.
Keeps you sharp. Number 4, final question. A writing habit or superstition you care to share?
Well, making space, I think that, and that I know can sound like a luxury to be able to do, but I just find that the way that work arrives is quite unpredictable, and the only thing I know how to really do is kind of clear psychic head space and time space, and then from doing other weird things like tidying my desk or suddenly deciding to reorder the things on my shelves or whatever, space makes things come, and then they come, and actually the birth of them is quite quick. So sometimes the amount of time is not very much, but you only can get that amount of time because you've created that buffer of space around it, and so it sort of defies productivity logic. And I think that's why there are all these myths and ideas about artists doing nothing, but that is essential. So making space and then recognizing when the thing arrives, because you can't predict when it, didn't some beautiful poet talk about that? It's like seeing the cloud come over and it's like, it's coming, like you got to grab it now. So yeah, making space is my secret. It's not much of a secret really, is it?
No, we need to be reminded of that in a busy, crammed, noisy world.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great place to end. Thank you for sharing your space with us, Jo.
It's really lovely to talk to you both, and thanks, Domi, for supporting us with the tech. And we'll see you all soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Come back and visit.
Love to.